Welcome to Hey Listen, where we discuss faith, leadership, and the mission of the church. We're so glad you've joined us. Now to today's episode. So we have started the conversation with just the dangers of addiction to technology. Then we talked about fake news and how do we know what the truth is and where are we looking for that. But then let's talk about, can our brain even stay focused long enough to hear the truth? And so what does that look like in technology for our kids and for adults alike?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a really good conversation for us to think about. Kind of want to think of it like Sundays and then Wednesdays in the life of the church, because we know that we're asking people to come in and listen to a worship service. Part of that's going to be a monologue, one guy talking. And I've done that for 31 years. I've been the one guy talking. And it's hard. Preaching is hard. Teaching is hard. Mm-hmm. When I think about what my wife does with second graders, I tell her, man, I had to preach twice today, 2 30-minute sermons. And she says, well, I lectured, for 7 hours today. So I whatever. But I think about how, as a communicator, what I do is hard. And I would imagine when you're talking to kids and keeping their attention, it's kind of a hard thing, isn't
absolutely.
it?
When we train our small group leaders, our Wednesday night leaders, teachers alike, we're telling them the average child has the number of minutes based on their age of their attention span.
Really?
Yeah. And so we train that. And so when I'm talking to my littlest teachers, my preschool, a 3-year-old can really focus for 3 minutes. Wow. Now, a 6th grader, they're about 12. That's still not very long. That we can expect them to just sit and listen. But I know part of what we're going to talk about today is going to push back on that a little bit.
Maybe so, because I guarantee you, the average 50-year-old doesn't got. They do not have 50 minutes.
No, I would love to see what the study is on adults. If we can say that about kids. Yeah. The adults is not much higher than the 12-year-old.
It doesn't got. That's great grammar. But anyway, some of that old Kentucky and my Western Kentucky roots coming out there. So looking at that would be great if that just did add a minute with.
Sure.
If that were true.
Your Wednesday night crew, they could hang with you for a long time.
Well, we do go 45 minutes and it seems to go okay, but that is a really small sample size. 100 people, been in church all their lives, love preaching, love the word.
Yeah, they are there because they want to continue to go deeper. They're taking their faith very seriously.
I love that group, but I always think how blessed I am to have that group, but that's not normal. I think the people we're trying to reach today, as we've been talking about, are more conditioned by, if they're my age, the sitcom era. So they've got about 22 to 30 minutes maybe of attention span. I can remember one of my professors in seminary in Texas, he said, as a communicator, you have to fire, and he would clap his hands real loud. I'm not going to do that right now because it'll make a loud noise, but you have to make a loud noise or do something to fire a gun. He said every 3 minutes to keep people's attention. So he was talking about a rhetorical idea or something that would grab people's attention. He wasn't necessarily talking about some circus act or anything like that, but that was back in 1999, and he was worried about attention spans. So that's 26, 27 years ago we were having these conversations. And again, before smartphones and before the things we've been talking about. So we can imagine that we probably, as communicators, you as a children's minister and myself as a pastor, we have a harder time. So what I'd like to do is you guys, me, I like history and looking at things from the past. And so I ran across this amazing story. It comes from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And this particular story happened October 16, 1854 in Peoria, Illinois. Okay. And so that particular debate, Douglas got the mic first, so to speak. Won the mic, but he was able to speak first. He spoke for 4 hours. It was at this big deal. It was like a carnival atmosphere, the way it was described. I mean, there was food and there were all these, people going around, but they sat down and listened for 4 hours. They took a dinner break. Lincoln came back and he spoke for 3 hours. And then Douglas got up and rebutted that for an hour and a half. So it was like almost an 8-hour day of of a lecture, and when you read what they said, they had written it out. Okay, so they were reading from manuscripts, and we have those manuscripts. We can actually look at what they were talking about. Some of it, not all of it. I'm sure some of it was extemporaneous. That's how they would do it, but it's not that riveting. In other words, oh, it was Lincoln, master communicator. Some people say, and I don't know how they would know this, but there is some reports that his speaking voice wasn't strong. It was squeaky.
Oh,
so you think about this big, because he was big for his time.
Yeah.
He was a big guy. But the evidence seems to suggest that he didn't have like this bellowing, deep, Adrian Rogers, beautiful voice.
That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't it though? I mean, it would be so funny to go back in time and you're waiting for this boisterous, booming, and then you hear a guy that sounds like Mickey Mouse. I hope that's not true, but maybe it is. So when I read that, I thought, okay, there is no way that even my Wednesday night crowd could do that. So when we look at American culture in the mid-1800s, so the mid-19th century, that culture was more literate than our culture is today. They were better read. I've told people, when you look at primary resources from that era, and what I mean by that is like personal letters and things of that nature, they tend to be filled with classical references. The thought process is very rhetorical and usually complex. And many times these are people that do not have formal degrees. They may have the equivalent of like a 10th grade education or something like that. And yet they're writing on this incredibly high level. So what we're seeing is that before TVs and before we were entertaining ourselves to death that way, people were able to think more systematically and clearly. To do that, you have to pay attention. So now let's fast forward to where we're at today, Kayla, and let's just ask the question: are the kids that are in elementary school today that have, maybe let's go a little bit further down the path, that remember COVID, that are going to remember COVID?
Okay.
Because that was a seminal event in our history.
Sure.
Those kids, my question is, are they not just, will they be able to listen? My question is, has technology and these little 10-second, 30-second, 1 minute sound bites, are they going to be able to think critically? So what do you think? When you're talking to parents, is there any worry that because their kids are on computers at school, they come home, they watch a show, they've got their phones? Is this a conversation anybody's having, that they're worried that their kids are going to be able to even think for themselves?
I think it is. I think it's a conversation people are having, probably not often enough. But I think it is a real fear. I think it is a reality that, even in my own kids, but in kids in our ministry, I'm seeing we're lacking problem solving skills, critical thinking, but just basic problem solving skills, being able to react quickly to something that's happening, or to deep think of this isn't working. What can I do to make those adjustments? But I think attention spans are going to continue to be a struggle for us in a church environment, because while we want to be fun, we do use some technology in our spaces. We'll watch a fun and silly video to kind of use an object lesson to get started, or we use worship videos downstairs. We don't want that to be what draws them here. We want them to come because they know they're going to learn true things from Scripture and be able to really grow in that way. We have a wide range of kids who come who, just last night, we had a little girl who said, I've never been in a church before. I'm excited about that. I want kids to come and hear things for the first time. But we also have families that are faithful to be in the Word as a family every single day. And so how do we make sure we're teaching truth while thinking about the varying attention spans, not just because of age, but because of the time that they're spending in technology, being distracted. My kids don't watch a lot of shorts. They are very limited in what they have access to. But the sixth grader next to them, they have TikTok on their phone. And so that's how they're getting their information.
We had a conversation this past Sunday with a 16-year-old, and we were trying to figure out lunch plans and that kind of thing. And it was interesting because the solution was obvious and easy. but the ability to connect those dots and, to use your phrase, problem solve wasn't there. And when you see things like that, sometimes you're prone to think, well, every once in a while our minds, we have those moments when we're not clear. But I think we're seeing that more and more. And I know my kids, my two oldest, they will sometimes accuse Jenny and I of having been helicopter parents and doing too much of their stuff or whatever, not teaching them things. But there is a sense in which the reality is, because they've been raised on technology to some extent, they haven't paid attention. They haven't. We've been there and doing these things, but they're kind of in that illusion, that augmented reality. They've not been paying attention. Now, I do think that some of that is probably our fault. But one of the things that the researchers are showing, there's this article, and we'll try to have some of this data for folks later, some of the other references that we've made. But it's saying that there seems to be some direct correlations between screen time and ADHD and increases in it. So now all of a sudden, this is not just about a kind of a funny anecdote about our children not knowing how to problem solve.
Right.
But now it could be that this, and it's not just that they're not able to be first-rate philosophers and be able to think, my goodness, this could cause them to not be able to work a job well.
Absolutely.
Or, really they could do damage to a relationship because they're not paying attention to the emotional needs of the other. Now we're in a whole nother realm of problems. Yeah. So this is serious.
It's like we can multitask everything, but there's no depth then. When we are, we can move from one thing to another on our phone. We can watch this. We can even, I can't remember what it's called, but where you can be watching a video and swipe up and the video stays small while you now check your email. I mean, you can be multitasking on your phone, but our kids are doing that. If they're watching TV and then, another one's playing on the Switch beside them, or they're on an iPad, or, whatever is happening around them, they're multitasking, but we know we can only absorb so much information. Even if it's a silly show, we're paying attention to all of the other things around us. And so there's no depth. And I would say we would see that at church too. If we're trying to just move quickly, we can't reduce the gospel to 3 minutes. We can't, or 90 seconds. We talk about having a 30-second testimony. We want to be able to share truth with people quickly. That's a skill we should have, but we cannot reduce the truth of what we're trying to teach into these little tidbits.
Well, let's talk about that. Jesus is the master communicator. And when we look at how he cared for people through his teachings, notice, and it's not just him, we see it all through the Bible. Really, all of the Bible has these two elements in it. But we can learn well through stories. So Jesus told some of the best stories, and some of his stories are deep, and we can spend our lifetimes unpacking those parables, and they're vivid, and they connect with us. But another part of what Jesus's teachings are is propositional. And what I mean by that is they are presenting truth in proposition form. And that's different than, when I paint a picture of a story, like in a previous episode, we were talking about the pushing of the baby carriage, right? Well, in your mind's eye, you could see that. You could see a baby in a carriage, okay? So a story has the ability for us to create an image in our mind. And my image was different than yours. My image, for some reason, was a black stroller when it came into my mind. So we all kind of, we build a little world. Even when we read, we will build kind of a world. That's a powerful way to learn. But the problem with it is that it's very subjective. For instance, when someone watches a movie after they've read a book, they'll say things like, well, that's not how I saw it. Okay, so that's just an example of a limit to a story and a limit to a picture we could paint. Even when we see like a video or an image, people will see different things in it. You'll go back later and say, well, I didn't see that in the far corner, or, oh, now I see it in this context, or whatever. But so that's one thing. The other thing is propositional truth. Propositional truth requires a different kind of focus, and it engages the mind in a different way. It's kind of the systematic theology approach. It's when a lot of preaching, it will have like 4 application points, right? And these are propositions of, Jesus is Lord and Savior. Jesus died on the cross to save our sins. Jesus rose from the grave to defeat death, and he now is risen and is going to rule over the world forever. So every one of those are propositional truths that we build one on the other, and it requires focusing, understanding, linking those thoughts. I think that the TikTok, Facebook, social media world is making it much more difficult for us to think in terms of propositional truth. And so when we have a story and we can interpret it, we like that because we can make it what we want it to be. But when Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, you can't make that what you want it to be.
Right.
It's either true or it's false.
Right.
So one of the things we see in logic is that you cannot have something. It can't contradict itself. The law of non-contradiction. You can't have 2 things that say opposite things and they both be true. And yet, the culture has been talking about, well, what's true to you matters. Follow your heart.
Right.
I mean, we know as Christians automatically that that's not feasible. But our kids are now able to tap into this whole world of different ideas, which is good. I think having a broad perspective of the world, we've talked about that in these discussions, knowing what's going on in India or Pakistan or whatever, it's wonderful. But what happens is that we're hearing all these different ideas, and we've lost the ability to discern truth from error. And the only way we can do that is to think propositionally, to think in a more systematic way. And it seems to me we're getting to a place where, I know we're never going to get back to 8 hours of listening to a lecture. But going back to Postman says we live in a peekaboo culture. Again, amazing that he would say this before Facebook and before TikTok. This, peekaboo is fun. It's like 1 minute I'm here and 1 minute I'm not. That is what social media is doing to us. It's bringing us into what Postman, I think, would agree is a peekaboo reality. That is just, it's child's play, but it's not substantive. It doesn't, it's not going to take us to deeper truths.
Right. And if it doesn't catch our attention quick enough, we're going to keep scrolling anyways. We're not even going to wait for it to come back and so we can see it. We're just going to move right on.
Exactly. And that's another thing is we can just swipe it away. And I know I took some fasts off of Facebook because I came to a point where I wanted to keep up with my friends and see what was going on, especially since Jenny and I have not lived near our home, really our entire married life. So I do thank God for social media. I know some things that are happening in some of my old grade school friends' lives. That's cool.
Yeah.
But I was getting to a point where so much of what social media is people trying to create, especially in ministry, that everything's great. And I don't know about you, but like if I'm in a down point, if I'm feeling like I'm not, like it's like things aren't going well here at Ridgecrest, it just almost like, I don't want to see that someone else is doing well. It's just like, so I got to the point where I realized I had to put that away for a while because it has the capacity to get me down. But then again, there are some times when we are looking at a truth and it can't go away. Like if we're having trouble with our marriage or with our kids, we can't just turn it off. That's where technology is maybe training us to think that if it's a problem, we just swipe it away. And people matter, their hearts matter, and we can't just remove them from the equation when it's convenient. And so this is where the attention span and learning how to think critically. It's not just about being a good apologist, being able to share the gospel in 30 seconds, 3 minutes, or 30 minutes. It really is about being a loving, caring human being.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Hey Listen.